Go to tcm.com/tours.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Ben Mankiewicz, back again for more of our look at films made by John Huston before, during, and after the Second World War. Back with me is the writer of the book Five Came Back, author and film historian Mark Harris. Mark, welcome back.
Thanks, Ben. I'm glad to be here.
Today, in this country's state of near constant war, we openly discuss the trauma suffered by soldiers once they return home from combat. My hunch is the term PTSD is familiar to nearly every American. That was certainly not the case after World War II. And that's the subject of John Huston's controversial documentary, Let There Be Light. This movie was banned for how long, Mark?
Something like 35 years after Huston completed it.
And why? What were the concerns?
Well, this was Huston's last assignment as an Army documentarian, and it had a specific propagandistic purpose. The movie was intended to convince American businesses that psychiatric treatment of emotionally scarred GIs and veterans was so effective that no one need hesitate in hiring them. The movie sort of fulfilled that. You will see that while it doesn't really talk about miracle cures, Huston himself admitted that he picked the most extreme cases of psychological quick fixes.
The best success stories are in the movie.
Right, but it's the first third of the movie in which you see intake interviews of emotionally injured veterans in an Army hospital that was so jarring and so jolting that the Army essentially kept coming up with reasons that they couldn't release it. First, it was that Huston hadn't gotten the proper release forms. Second, there were perhaps issues in terms of whether the subjects of the film were fit to give consent to participate in a movie, although apparently most of them were very enthusiastic about being in the movie. In any case, the movie was suppressed, and Huston, for the rest of his career, tried repeatedly to appeal that. It had initially literally had its prints seized and taken from the Museum of Modern Art before it was going to be shown in a documentary film festival. And it wasn't until, I think, Walter Mondale intervened during the Carter administration that the movie finally got shown.
Well, the consent issue, after watching the movie, is a legitimate issue. These were men being treated for mental illness, being treated for PTSD. They may not have been in condition to give consent at the time.
Right. I feel very conflicted about this because, on one hand, that's absolutely true, and I don't think there's any doubt when you look at some of these people shown at the beginning of the movie, you have to ask how they could be considered fit to consent. On the other hand, the fact that Huston made this movie and filmed them gives you the most honest and most unsparing look at what the war did to some of these men, the toll that it took on these men, that I've ever seen in a nonfiction film about World War II.
The numbers on PTSD in World War II, and it wasn't called that then, is staggering. 1 in 5 of the soldiers being treated at Veterans Hospital were being treated essentially for PTSD.
Right, and although Huston himself was not treated from PTSD, when you read his accounts of his time in the service, it seems very, very clear that he suffered from it. He had nightmares when he got back to the United States. He would sleep with his service revolver. He said that for a time he would walk into Central Park in New York City at night looking for someone to mug him so he would have someone to shoot. He had had a very, very close friend who was a cameraman on his first war documentary, Report from the Aleutians, have a complete nervous breakdown and end up in a veterans hospital. So he wanted to fulfill this assignment in part because the issue was close to his heart, but also in part because he really believed in what psychologists and psychiatrists could do. He was incredibly impressed by the way his friend had been treated.
All right, Mark, thanks very much. From 1946, narrated by Walter Huston, here is John Huston's Let There Be Light.